Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality back with you here today, and you probably have heard over the last couple of weeks that a lot of stuff about Clarence Thomas being in the news, and just people going after the conservative Supreme Court justices. So I thought this would be an interesting article to talk about. So this is from townhall.com from May 4th. It's called "Who is Planting All the Bogus Hatchet Jobs on Conservative SCOTUS Justices?" So this is kind of a long one, but we'll just get right into it. So as we mentioned in yesterday's post, all of these hatchet job investigative news stories about conservative Supreme Court justices' supposed ethics issues have just happened to sprout up over the span of a few weeks. And yes, they're exclusively about the conservative justices. So as we've discussed the incredibly feeble nature of these allegations, which mainly rely on inventing entirely new and separate standards for certain justices in order to manufacture a cloud of corruption-adjacent suspicion over their reputations, and therefore the legitimacy of the court's conservative majority itself. The scheme is not subtle. 1. Someone is planting these weak Oppo research hits against right-leaning justices and their allies. 2. Ideologically aligned media organizations are publishing the stories. 3. Progressives are eagerly sharing the sensational-sounding headlines in social media in order to amplify the scandal. Leading to 4. Senate Democrats holding hearings about ethical concerns and reforms. As the Wall Street Journal's editors wrote earlier this week, it's important to understand that this isn't about ethics at all. This is another front in the political campaign to delegitimize the Supreme Court with the goal of tarnishing its rulings and subjecting it to more political control. Of course, because you always see like Elizabeth Warren and AOC, two titans of thought on the progressive left. I say that with all due sarcasm, coming out and just trying to undermine everything about the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court makes decisions that they just don't like. Doesn't mean they're not legitimate. They 100% are. Just means you don't like what they did. Okay? So let's keep going with the article. It says the latest in this string of empty bombshells and bunny ears is another allegation against Justice Clarence Thomas regarding financial disclosures. As Katie noted earlier, and that's Katie Pavlich, who is, I believe, the editor-in-chief of the Town Hall group of websites. And I didn't read that particular article, but we'll just go with it. It says, as Katie noted earlier, one of the Thomas's close friends has publicly detailed what exactly happened and did not happen in this case. Journalist Tim Carney observes that if this is the substantive extent of the scandal, it amounts to yet another embarrassingly partisan nothing burger, as these all tend to do. You always hear from the progressives too that whenever they're going after a conservative, like, oh my God, scandal, and then it comes out that it's like, oh, the guy like clipped his nails over the toilet instead of the sink, and it's like that's what we're upset about, really. So yeah, I'm not surprised that this is just a nothing burger, but let's keep going. It says, unless a reporter can poke a major hole in this statement, this latest story looks like a total flop, to put it nicely. Here is the key portion of the statement from Thomas's friend Mark Paoletta, a prominent attorney who has worked in multiple Republican presidential administrations. Excuse me. Quote, "This story is another attempt to manufacture a scandal about Justice Thomas, but let's be clear about what is supposedly scandalous now. Justice Thomas and his wife devoted 12 years of their lives to taking in and caring for a beloved child who was not their own, just as Justice Thomas's grandparents had done for him. They made many personal and financial sacrifices to do this, and along the way, their friends joined them in doing everything possible to give this child a future. Harlan Crow," and that's the guy that all the progressives are saying, gave all this money to Justice Thomas. So this is the guy at like the center of this scandal. Okay, so Harlan Crow's tuition payments made directly to these schools on behalf of Justice Thomas's great-nephew did not constitute a reportable gift. Justice Thomas was not required to disclose the tuition payments made directly to Randolph Macon and the Georgia school on behalf of his great-nephew because the definition of a dependent child under the Ethics in Government Act does not include a great-nephew. It is limited to a son, daughter, stepson, or stepdaughter. Justice Thomas never asked Harlan Crow to pay for his great-nephew's tuition, and neither Harlan Crow nor his company had any business before the Supreme Court. So there we go. We're done. This isn't an issue anymore. It's just, here it is. That's it. Case closed. We're done. Let's move on. But we're going to keep going with the article because, of course, excuse me, there is more, and no, I'm not editing that out. It says, that last sentence is crucial. It does not appear as though Clarence Thomas breached any ethical or disclosure requirements by not including these tuition payments. But more importantly, once again, the wealthy friend in question, it's the same man whom the Thomases travel and vacation, never had any business before the court. That is the key point. It says this might be considered corruption if Thomas withheld required information and abused his power of his position of power to benefit his friend's legal interests. From what we've seen, nobody is even trying to allege the latter half of that hypothetical quid pro quo. Molly Hemingway, who is I believe the editor-in-chief of the Federalist, asks a fair question. Here's her embedded tweet. It says, 1, it was a grandnephew. 2, it was not reportable under the rules. 3, the friend who paid has never had business before the court. But then she said, but I am curious who is paying for the highly coordinated effort between Democrats and the media to attack the court. Those involved should disclose now. And back to the article, it says, it's possible that all these outlets, from ProPublica to Politico to the New York Times, all just happened to stumble across dormant, non-damning stories connected to the Supreme Court's conservative members over the course of a small handful of weeks. Somehow I doubt that. Those guys live in an echo chamber, and if one of them picks it up, then another one's just going to pick it up and just go, oh, because that first one reported it, it must be right, so let's report it. And then after the second one does, the third one comes in and goes, oh, wait, those other 2 guys reported it, it must be true, let's go ahead and run a story too, and it just keeps going and going. They don't bother to check it. They just say, oh, because it's the New York Times or Politico, it must be true, so let's just go ahead and report this crap. Article goes on, says, just like it's possible that the White House got really lucky in guessing the exact, somewhat obscure topic a reporter at the Los Angeles Times would ask when they awarded her the designated first question at a recent presidential press conference, it strikes me as more likely that some individuals or entities are emptying their clip of hilariously weak dirt on this court's conservative wing in a strategic way, coordinating with their fellow partisans in the press to deliver a pretext for Democrats to exploit in assailing an institution they do not currently control. That sounds about right to me. Mysteriously, none of these claims, several of which involved years-old issues, ever materialized until early to mid-2023, and none of them involved any of the court's liberal justices. How strange. One might conclude that's because Democrat-appointed justices are scrupulous paragons of virtue and ethical rectitude, unlike their beastly and corrupt right-wing counterparts. Alternatively, one might conclude it's because the whole point of this unsubtle project is to undermine specific justices for patently ideological and political reasons. I would certainly agree with that. Since if you're inclined to believe the former explanation, please explain the total lack of media-driven scandal bring around these examples. So here we go. Quote, so Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she's the newest justice to the court, didn't get the same attention when she revised her financial disclosures in 2022. Her oversights were far more extensive than Justice Thomas's. There was also no outcry in 2020 when Justice Sonia Sotomayor amended her financial disclosures after the group Fix the Court found that she hadn't disclosed reimbursement for trips to universities. Nor was there an uproar when the Open Secrets website reported in 2019 that former Justice Stephen Breyer was reimbursed for trips, some 219 times from 2004 to 2018. Some of those trips were supported by the wealthy Pritzker family, who are currently destroying my home state of Illinois. So there are other examples involving liberal justices. And how about this one, which Katie, again, Pavlich, who I mentioned before, also mentioned. And this is the one that I was thinking about. That was reported just a few days ago. Prior to this article, it says, liberal Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor declined to recuse herself from multiple copyright infringement cases involving book publisher Penguin Random House, despite having been paid millions by the firm for her books, making it by far her largest source of income. Records show. In 2010, she got a $1.2 million book advance from Knopf Doubleday Group, part of the conglomerate. In 2012, she reported receiving 2 advance payments from the publisher totaling $1.9 million. In 2013, Sotomayor voted in a decision for whether the court should hear a case against the publisher called Aaron Greenspan versus Random House, despite then-fellow Justice Stephen Breyer recusing after also receiving money from the publisher. Yeah, that sounds a little wonky there. So on to looks like the final paragraph. It says, I think you can make a case for Sotomayor not needing to recuse, but this is far worse than at least half a dozen of the recent major media stories targeting conservative justices, and those same outlets have zero interest in it, one conservative writer and attorney observes. In addressing those other stories about leftist justices, the Wall Street Journal editorial is quick to add, we believe none of these justices did anything wrong. And to be very clear about something, raising these examples is not whataboutism, it's aboutism. If frail, debatable, unserious, ostensible ethical lapses are deemed highly problematic for conservative justices, but arguably less frail, debatable, unserious, ostensible ethical lapses are totally ignored by the very same problematic police, the reality of what is happening here becomes painfully obvious. This institution assaulting collusion should be loudly called out for what it is and elicit vigorous defenses and counterattacks. And the targeted justices should completely ignore the unscrupulous rage machine and continue going about their work. So yeah, so that's what's been going on in the justice lately. So all the stuff going on that's knocking Clarence Thomas and he's bad because these guys have been after him basically since he was confirmed to the court. Go look up the way Joe Biden treated him in his confirmation hearings. It's like, it's insane. And if you see some of the stuff that happened, and it'll kind of give you an idea that Joe Biden is a certain R word, an ist thing. If you don't already think that, you will certainly think that after watching this, but they've been after that guy, so they're going to do anything they can. And seems like he's kind of, steeled himself to all of this that's going on and is just kind of like, yeah, whatever, you guys are going to keep doing your stuff, but I did nothing wrong, keep doing it. Meanwhile, on the other side, they've done worse. So, but no one's ever going to look at that because, they are paragons of virtue. They can't do anything wrong. That would, that would undermine everything. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think this is unfair that whoever's doing this is going after the conservative justices, especially Clarence Thomas, when their own side seems to be doing worse things? Any other thoughts on it? Leave them in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.